friend, welcome. I am so excited you're here. I am going to start building a new project, and this one's for my home office. It is a filing cabinet which is going to replace the existing metal file cabinet that I bought off of Craigslist like 10 years ago. It's going to be a pretty straightforward project, or at least that's what I think. I actually have no idea what it's going to look like in the end. I haven't picked out the finish, I haven't picked out the color yet, but I know how I want to build it, and I know the features I want to have in it. So let's get to building, and we'll figure it out as we go. Before we get started, if you are new here, I am Annika. I am here to demystify DIY and give you all the inspiration and empower you to build anything you can dream of. Let's go. The cabinet is built using 3/4 inch plywood, so I am going to be cutting that up using my circular saw and the Craig Rip Cut. The Craig Rip Cut makes it super easy to make repeatable, accurate cuts. You simply set it to the width you want to cut the plywood at, and you guide it along the edge and make the cuts. The Craig Rip Cut can cut from 24 inches wide all the way down to 1 inch. So basically I could make all of the cuts that I need for this project using just my circular saw and the Craig Rip Cut. Next up are pocket holes, and I whipped out the Craig 720 to make those pocket holes. And this project, this video, and the plans are sponsored by Craig, so you can find a link to the plans on the Craig website with the link in the description below. And if you want to learn more about how the Craig 720 works, I have a complete detailed video tutorial about that, and I will add a link to that as well in the description. Now, before assembling, I wanted to make sure that I covered all of the visible plywood edges, so I started by using edge banding. But then I moved on to wood filler because that's a much easier and quicker technique, especially because I am going to be painting this cabinet. Now, usually I use birch plywood for my projects, especially if I'm going to be painting them, but I could not find them at all in any store near my house, so I ended up having to buy sanded plywood, which is extremely rough. So to make it nice and smooth, I applied a generous coat of spackling compound on the entire surface, let it dry overnight, and then I came back the next day and sanded it smooth. And once this is painted, you will have no idea that this was sanded plywood. Alright, so now let's assemble. First up, we're going to attach the side to the top and the bottom. So I clamped a scrap piece of 2x4 to the workbench as support while I aligned and attached the side to the top using pocket hole screws. And then I just repeated that to attach the bottom as well. Next, I need to attach the shelf. So I measured and marked exactly where the shelf would go, aligned it, and held it in place using the Craig Versa Grip clamps, and attached using the pocket hole screws. So one side of the cabinet is complete, and now we just need to attach this entire thing onto the other side, which can be a little tricky because you have to make sure that all of the edges and the ends align really well as you attach them using pocket hole screws. And for that, clamps are your best friends. The spacing between the shelf and the top is pretty tight, but the Craig 90-degree adapter made it super easy to get the screws in. And the cabinet frame is complete. Now it's time to move on to the drawers. The drawers are built using 1/2 inch plywood, which once again I cut down using my circular saw and the rip cut guide. To make pocket holes in the 1/2 inch plywood, I am using the Craig 230 or the Craig Micro set to 1/2 inch thickness. The Craig Versa clamps come with this built-in attachment that is compatible with the Craig Micro Jig, the 300 series, as well as the Craig XL. And you simply snap it in and you tighten it to hold the jig on the board, and then we just go ahead and make the pocket holes. Now, making pocket holes in this 1/2 inch is just a little bit tricky because 1/2 inch plywood isn't exactly 1/2 inch, and also you need to use a 1 inch screw. So you have to play a little bit with the settings on the depth collar until you dial in exactly how deep you need to make those pocket holes to get the nice tight joint. To assemble the drawer, I put it together and held it in place using the Versa grip clamps as I added those pocket hole screws in. Now, whenever you build a drawer, you always want to check for square and correct for it if needed. And in this case, I definitely needed it, so I used the clamp to adjust for it and let it dry overnight. One thing to remember with the micro pocket holes is that you need to use the pan head pocket hole screws. And once the drawer is ready, I went ahead and added a 1/4 inch bottom with wood glue and finished nails. And now we have a large file drawer, a medium drawer, and a small drawer for storage. It is time to install these drawers inside the cabinet. I am using full extension ball bearing drawer slides. Attaching the drawers in place is super easy, and I have a full video that shows you exactly how to do this, and I will add a link to that in the description below. Now, one of the things that you want to pay attention to as you're attaching drawers like these is to make sure you account for the drawer front, because you don't want to attach the drawer and then have it hit the drawer front right here or the one above it. So what I like to do is I like to hold my drawer front right here, and I mean it's going to be raised up by 1/8 of an inch, but that's okay. That much we can take into account right now. So I keep that drawer front right there, and I want to make sure that I have enough buffer right here so that when I put in this drawer, it goes in such that it clears this drawer front. Now, with all the drawers installed, it's time for the drawer fronts, and you could simply go ahead and install the drawer fronts right here and add your drawer hardware and you're done. But we're going to be taking this up a notch, so I am going to be adding a little detail to the drawers before we attach them. For the drawer fronts, I decided to go with a fluted design, and I set up a stop block on my miter saw and cut down half round molding to the size of the drawer fronts. Each drawer front needs about 26 pieces, so that was a lot of cutting, and the stop block definitely helped. As you can see, I started off cutting one length of molding at a time, but then I switched to 3 at a time to make this process go much faster. And there we have all of the molding pieces ready to go for each of the drawer fronts. To attach the molding to the drawer fronts, I decided to go with a quick dry adhesive so that I did not have to worry about clamping or waiting for the wood glue to dry. I used a scrap piece of 2x4 to make sure that everything was aligned on one end, so that if there were any variations on the other end, I could cut it off using a circular saw or a table saw. And I did have variations because in some cases I was left with pieces of molding that were too large for what I needed, but were too small to be able to safely cut them on the miter saw. It was a lot of gluing, and to be honest, my hands got a little tired from squeezing that glue bottle, so I put the Versa grip clamps to work for me. Once everything was glued and dried, I trimmed down the drawer fronts on my table saw. To give the drawers a finished look, I applied the wood filler on all of the edges and sanded it down smooth. And I filled any visible pocket hole screws. And to get ready to paint the cabinet, I took out all of the drawers and covered all of the drawer slides with tape to protect them from the primer and paint. I broke out my paint sprayer to apply the primer and paint, especially because the fluted drawer fronts definitely need a paint sprayer to make sure that you can get into all of those tight spots. Once a couple coats of primer were dry, I gave it a light sanding, wiped off all of the dust, and then went ahead and gave it a couple coats of paint. It did take me a long time to pick this color, but ultimately I am so glad I did. I absolutely love it. Now with the paint dry, it is time to put the drawers back in and attach the drawer fronts. Now attaching these drawer fronts can be a little bit tricky, but in this case we're going to use this double-sided foam tape, and this tape is going to hold the drawers in place as you pull it out and attach the countersunk screws from the inside. To add these countersunk screws, I love using my Craig quick flip because I can easily make the countersunk hole and flip the bit and add the pocket hole screw in. I repeated the same process for the other two drawer fronts and then added the drawer pull hardware. And there, my friends, the cabinet is complete. Now we do have one more thing to do before we can really call this complete, and that is adding something to the bottom. These can be casters if you like, or you can build your own legs, but I decided to go with these pre-made brass legs to match the drawer pulls. And finally, for the file drawer, I picked up these hanging file rails, which essentially just sit on the 1/2-inch plywood, and a file folder fits perfectly in there. And there is the file cabinet. It's got all the extra storage with the drawers, and also it works great as a printer stand. Don't forget, I have the complete step-by-step plans for you, including the dimensions, the cut list, and the schematics, and I have the link to that in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Here are a few other projects that you might find interesting, and I will see you next time.